Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Onward to Victory podcast, your one place for all things George Mason basketball. I'm Joe Szymanski. That's my co-host and friend Palmer Johnson right next to me. Palmer, I'm energized again, Palmer. There's more energy in my voice than there's been over the last month because, man, it looks like Mason has finally gotten over that ailment, that hump that was killing him in February. We've got it back here, Palmer. The vibes are back. It did start this week, though, with a loss, but it was a competitive, tightly fought game at the Siegel Center. Mason falls 70-65 to VCU. But Palmer, there are a lot of good things to come out of that game.
Yeah, I think that was the game where, Mason. You never had it with the loss, but Mason figured out the double big lineup that could work. Rather than kind of scrambling to find a four, just put a five at the four, because unfortunately Mason's fours haven't really added anything on offense, and so at least with the double five, you're adding defense.
Absolutely. Certainly that seems to be the play. It was a tough game, but again, I think we'll get into yesterday's game. We're recording this Sunday afternoon. We'll get into yesterday's game shortly. But Palmer, I think certainly the big difference. The starts for Mason the last couple of games have been completely different than what we've seen, not just through that losing streak in February, but throughout the most of the season. Mason, so long have they struggled to start well. Over the last three games, Palmer, the starts have been massive.
Yeah, I mean, because the first 4 minutes of every game were just basically waiting for somebody to get subbed out, and somebody was always having a bad time, and then they had to get put out, and then it would be fine once the next lineup comes in. It'd be fine, but it was just that initial lineup was always something was always missing.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like I said, just a tough battle. Maybe a little bit more three-point shooting. Obviously, you have Jahari Long and Masai Troutman going combined 1 for 10 in the game against VCU. But I think maybe the most critical aspect of all, Palmer, Corey Mincy got his drive back. I think he's admitted it. He's talked about to TV guys about how this has been more a mental thing than a pain thing for him with his thumb injury. But it seems like in this game specifically, it kind of showed a little bit in the Bonaventure game, but it feels like the VCU game specifically is where he kind of just finally broke through, not just got through, but ran through that mental wall that's been affecting him.
Yeah, I mean, because it was at the point where he was a complete negative on the court, and now he's back to, okay, this guy's going to hit threes. This guy's going to get himself open from three, and he's a driving threat. And that was a big thing, because when he was struggling, I felt like the hand play definitely had a big part of it, but also it felt like those shots there where he was getting to the rim and getting fouled, he was pulling up from mid-range. And it's nice that he can pull up from mid-range, but you'd much rather he go to the rim and something happens. Because when you shoot the mid-range, like, it's either going in or it isn't. But when you're driving to the rim, it's either going in or it isn't, or you get fouled. And he was getting fouled a decent bit, and now he wasn't for a while. And now he's kind of back to that.
Yep. Yeah, and that's just such a huge thing. It opens up the court so much for Mason Palmer. It really does. It opens up the court so much for this team when he's able to get going, to get to the basket like that. It just does change things so rapidly for this group. It makes them that much more effective, that much more efficient. There is no doubt about that. But, we still have to talk about the loss here. I mean, look, this is a very good VCU team. It has been extremely hard to beat VCU at home at any time of the year. Like I said, though, this game, though, felt like more was about the fact there was a complete 40-minute effort. The fight was there. They were in the game at every minute. I think comparatively, you look at the results that came beforehand, it just felt, even though it was a loss, it felt good to go into that environment, go into a tough place, go into against the VCU team that's been really hot since Mason beat them in Fairfax back in January. It feels like a different team.
Yeah, I mean, both teams are different. Mason's a lot more different, but both teams are really different. Mason won the season series by 1 point. All I'm saying. And yeah, as I said, as we kind of say, like, it's a loss, but you feel like, okay, Mason, we're used to they go down to the Siegel Center, and at some point during the game, there's just like a 15-0 run. Like VCU's up 2, and then they're up 15. It's like, oh, okay, the game's over. And it just kind of makes you feel like, okay, on our neutral court, they can beat them. And kind of, there's not like this team is not unbeatable. Like Mason kind of had some crazy like unforced turnovers in that game.
Yeah.
They had at least 2, one of the where the guy drives and doesn't dribble, and they call the travel. That feels like the calling is inconsistent. Feels like they call when they feel like it. Pretty sure they had multiple where they just kind of like threw it out of bounds. It's like, oh, okay. Pretty sure somebody like caught it, called the ball in the corner, threw it out of bounds. Mason didn't play as well as they could have, and they lost by 5. So it's kind of like Mason might win that game on some days. And hopefully one of those days is maybe in like a week from today.
Yeah, that'd be nice, wouldn't it, Palmer? That'd be nice. But let's get to the game that everyone's talking about, because everyone's talking about Mason again, Palmer, and it's in a good way. Mason, yesterday afternoon, 4 o'clock start. Palmer, we were the last A10 regular season game of the season. Mason versus St. Louis, standalone 4 o'clock game, the last A10 regular season game of the season. And Palmer, all I gotta have to say is holy shit. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. I don't think in my wildest dreams anyone could have predicted that. Mason wins by 29 over the previously ranked 25th in the country Billikens, 86-57. I mean, Palmer. I mean, not much else to talk about here. Huge game for Nick Ellington on his senior night. Got the start at the 4. We've talked about Mason starting to play that 2 big lineup more. Tony Skinn admitted in his press conference, maybe he feels like a bit of an idiot because he's been trying to figure out ways to get Nick Ellington more playtime. Maybe he is just going to be the second big in the lineup. Maybe that's his calling. Maybe that's what we see in Pittsburgh. But anyways, 5 Patriots in double figures on the game. Just a masterclass, Palmer. A masterclass in Mason basketball.
Yeah, I mean, if you had told me that St. Louis was putting their kind of end of the bench guys in with, I mean, Jax Kerr got 9 minutes. He doesn't get minutes. So, like, if you told me that, I would have guessed Mason's down 35. But Mason was up 35. I thought it was a lot more likely that Mason was down 30 in the first half than to win by 30.
Yeah.
Because St. Louis, okay, honestly, until, like, there was some point where, like, I looked up and it was like, oh, it's 25 with, like, 8 minutes left. That's when I realized, like, oh, Mason's going to win this game. Because I was always, when it was like 15 for a while, it was like, St. Louis, they always have that run. They're going to have this random 10-0 run. And just kind of never showed up. Obviously, a big thing was Avila got 2 fouls in like the first, like, I think it was before like it hit 18 minutes. He got a second foul.
It was around the first 3 minutes, I think. Yeah. It was first 3 or 4 minutes.
He goes out and comes back in. And I want to say, might have been on the first, like he might have subbed in and like Mason had the ball when he subbed in.
It was no more than a minute. It was more than a minute when he came back in and got his 3rd foul.
Yeah. It was one of those, like, you still remembered him subbing in. He didn't get to play. That was if you watch that game, Avila was, it's just, I'm going to say it's kind of unlucky because he doesn't foul a lot. Like, he averages like less than 3 fouls for 40. And unfortunately for him, like, his first 2 times Mason went at him, he fouled him. This was just it's partially luck. SLU went 4 for 24, but Mason defended them very well. Like, there were only like early in the game, they hit a couple threes, but honestly at halftime, I was like, they might be like 2 for 20, and they were 4 for 24. So it's like, that's really bad, especially for a team that shoots like 44% from 3. But Mason was really defending them. They were just kind of committing to going over screens and then going through. They were just not. I'll say they kind of understood that, oh, this guy, if he gets the ball, he's going to shoot it moving.
Yeah. There wasn't a lot of like non-shooters. Like, it's maybe Kellen Thames, Paul Otiento, and sometimes Maury McCautry.
Yeah.
Who I think Josh Hurts probably tells not to shoot threes. Everyone else can. That's why we talked about this in our preview last week, Palmer. That's why it's so scary to play SLU, because they can just do things like that.
And by you don't mean they can make threes. It's no, they will. Like, they're shooting 45%. Like, that lineup with Brady Dunlap and Ishan Sharma, I was glad they stopped running it because that lineup was so scary because it was like, yeah, Mason can play pretty good defense and it just doesn't matter because Dunlap is 6'7", 6'8", and is going to shoot over whoever's coming around the screen. And for whatever reason, that just didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, they put out lineups that sometimes I believe they put out lineups that are sometimes, it's like Quentin Jones, who's a 42% three-point shooter in conference, Trey Green, who's a 47% three-point shooter in conference, Ishan Sharma, who's a 48% three-point shooter in conference, Brady Dunlap, who's a 49% three-point shooter in conference. And then it's like, I mean, it didn't happen obviously much this game because of his foul trouble, but then they throw out like Robbie Avila sometimes in that lineup, and he's a 40% three-point shooter. I mean, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
That's the question. Mason just did it. I mean, again, no Avila, obviously that means that I think particularly with the double bigs that we're running, obviously that means, especially I think if you throw Allenspach out there, he's someone who's more comfortable with guarding the perimeter because he plays out there. Offensively, he's more comfortable with guarding it. So again, if Avila's out, that means Mason, if they're running the double bigs, if they want to throw Allenspach out there to cover a perimeter, a perimeter guy, they can do that. Like, it's not perfect, but they can do it. Certainly, that was the big difference I felt there. The rebounding of Ellington and Conga was superb, each getting 10 and 11 boards respectively this game. Just massive on the boards. I mean, Mason dominated. I mean, SLU only got 26 rebounds on the day compared to Mason's 41, nearly doubling them up in rebounds on the day. Also, 15 assists from Mason, including combined 14 of those coming from Long and Mincy. Long had 9 assists and 21 points. I mean, he's still been a little bit cold from three, but we've seen what he can do when he drives to the basket all year, Palmer. I mean, yesterday was a masterclass. 9 for 11 from two. We've seen him when he is confident enough to do it. He could just take it to the basket whenever he wants, Palmer. He really can.
That's that veteran, I mean, 6-year senior, just that snaking around the screen, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's a guy like 2 feet behind me, but I'm 2 feet in front of him. And if I lean forward and shoot it, like, take this layup, he can't really do anything about it. And I think Long just knows exactly how open he needs to be to take these shots. And he was getting exactly that open 9 times. I mean, he was MVP of the game, 21 points, 9 assists, 1 turnover. That was just kind of crazy. There's some Mason fans who've only been to 2 games this year, or three games this year, VCU, Homecoming, St. Joe's, and St. Louis. They probably think Charlie Long is the best player in the country. I mean, that's the 3 biggest crowds, and it's crazy. So yeah, I mean, I'm so happy for him because early in the game he was kind of, I think he had no points decent bit into the game. And it's like he's taking a lot of shots, and then he might have like, I think he was like 0 for 3 from 3 and like 0 for 2 from 2, and he might have like gone like, I don't think he missed a 2 after that, and then I don't think he. But keep in mind, a lot of them were at the rim. He took a couple of like fading mid ranges that just kind of went in. It's like, yeah, it's his night.
Yep.
Yeah. Also, Conga had 8 offensive rebounds.
Yeah.
I think one of them was a self rebound because he only had 2 misses, and one of them was the one where like he just kind of threw it at the glass. I don't know what happened. He just just
threw it at the glass. Yeah.
Like I really don't know what happened. He must have like honestly thought he was somewhere else. If you know what I mean. Kind of like he was shooting like, oh, I'm a lot closer than I thought he was. So he only had 1 like rebound. So he was just a force. I mean, Otieno, honestly, I thought Otieno was going to be like kind of counteract Conga, and is like, wow,
he did nothing. I mean, that was SLU's biggest problem this game.
Yeah,
Paul Otieno was ineffective on both ends of the floor.
Yeah,
Mason
I mean,
completely neutralized him.
He took 0 shots, which that's fine, but it was just like his whole thing is like he's big and tough and defensive, and he kind of wasn't. It was just that is not what he was truly it's pretty rare that this happens, but like for such a good team, for a guy to give you absolutely nothing, especially for such a pivotal player of like, this guy needs to stop somebody. Like somebody on Mason needs to have an awful game because of him, and nobody did. Nobody did.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's just what this team does, what they've been very good at. Yeah. I mean, I think the moment for me when I mean, like you said, kind of waiting in that second half, like when are they going to go on this run? Like Ishan Sharma had a pretty open three, I think, like 5 minutes into the second half, that like just didn't fall, like it rimmed in and out, and I was like, oh, that's what for me was like my recognition, like, oh, Mason's going to win this game. Like I don't think SLU has it. I mean, to win by 29 it is extraordinary. I mean, let's be real. When he sat Avila and he put Jax Kerr in the game, that was it. I think Mason was maybe only up 20 by that point. I mean, it's so eerily reminiscent. I guess you don't want to be a 1 seed coming in to play Tony Skin at the end of the last regular season game of the year. You remember a couple of years ago, Palmer, when Richmond, who was who was a confirmed number 1 seed, going into play Mason in the final game of the year in that 23-24 season, and they got blown out. Like they sat Jordan King and Neil Quinn with like 9 minutes left to go in that game, because the team just was not there. Like the team, Mason, obviously it wasn't as big of an offensive win. I think they won by 18 that game, but I remember Jordan King and Neil Quinn just being sat on the bench for the last 8-9 minutes of the game because it was over and Coach Woody won the rest of his guys for the tournament. So one of those things, Palmer. One of those things.
Yeah, the 1 seed who win, like the 1 seed who clinches it in the second to last game, somehow they always play like I say middling team, 5 seed. Well, you know what I mean? Normally it's from like an 8 seed, but like when they've already kind of cut down the nets, like we have the 1 seed, and then they go and play a team that they probably should beat. They lose a lot more often than they should. I don't know if it is like the we won, but Richmond, I can kind of get it. This one, like, no, St. Louis, like, you're an at-large team, and look, like, losing to Mason isn't a bad loss. Like, it could be Q1. I don't know. I should check right now, but it's probably Q2.
I think I checked this morning. I think we're back up to like 88th or something like that.
Okay, so like it's gonna be Q2, which is not like it's not a horrific loss if you lost by 5, but you lost by 29. The committee is looking for any excuse to give your bid to, 16 and 17 Auburn. They really want to. They want to so bad. It's just this could like actually affect them. Like they were an 8 seed. There's no way they were an 8 seed before the game, and Lenardi had him as an 8 seed after the game. I don't believe that. I think Lenardi just ignored the game, didn't realize it happened. This could be a thing where like they might not be able to lose. Like if they lose the 8 to the 8 or 9 team, like they might be sweating on Sunday.
Yeah, I think they have to. If we want to talk, let's try and get into this a little bit here. Let's move on here. Let's talk about Pittsburgh, and we're not going to just talk about Mason. Let's talk about the wider stream here of the A10. Yesterday, as much as I loathe to admit it, Palmer, if you're talking about bubble teams who won yesterday, this weekend the only bubble team that seemed like had a good weekend was VCU, Palmer. VCU gets a Q1 win at Dayton, currently ranked 74th in net, so that's a Q1 win on the road. And then basically every other bubble team lost, and SLU lost, and now they can claim a co-championship in the A10 this season. I mean, like, it's very, I mean, look, personally, I think if SLU wins their quarterfinal game, they're in. Because I think any other game, whether that's, Mason, Dayton, VCU in a title game potentially, all of those games will be Q2 to Q1 at worst after those games. If you lose, I think Fordham could do it, but let's try and look at the chalk here. Let's say it's it's going to be GW versus SLU on Thursday morning at 11:30 in Pittsburgh. I think SLU has to win that game. I agree with you. I think St. Louis has to win that basket. If they do, they're in. If they do, there's no chance for any other true bad losses. They're in. I think that's undeniable at this point. I think SLU is in it if they win that game. If they lose to GW, which by the way, couldn't if Mason can, keep going this momentum, that could set up the biggest revolutionary rivalry ever in that case. Let's not get too deep in the hypotheticals, but it could set up the biggest revolutionary rivalry ever in that case. But if they lose that game, they're sweating. I mean, that's probably a second Q3 loss. That's their fourth loss in their last 7 games. Yeah, it just doesn't look good, Palmer. It just doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, St. Louis like 2 weeks ago is like they're so obviously in. They're so obviously in. But just this 30-point loss is like I said, like if you lost by 5, nobody really cares.
Yeah.
But you lost by 30, like this like actually affects your metrics. Because on KenPom they went from 26 to 40. That's crazy in March.
Yep.
And I mean they're ranked 27th right now in the net. So like I said, like they're fine now. They are fine right now. But
they need to be. It's crazy to say, but they need to win that quarterfinal game.
Yeah, because if they drop to like 32, you're telling me they're not going to move that Auburn team? Like, oh yeah, we need that Auburn team in there, or they're going to move somebody ahead, and it's just like I said, if they win that game, they're not even sweating it. They're like, we're in. But if you lose that game to Fordham or GW, especially Fordham, I think Fordham has a better chance to beat them just because they're so weird. They just play like, you know what I mean? Like it's you just don't know what's going to happen. It's kind of like a random number generator. Like they lose most of the time, but they might not this time. It's just such a crazy fall. On the bright side for Mason, since the Bonaventure game, like including that game, they're the 19th ranked team on Torvik. That's crazy. Which is ahead of like some really high teams. So they're getting hot at the right time, which is crazy. Like a week ago, they were not getting hot at the right time, but now they are. The tournament was like kind of like a week and a half ago. The tournament's just kind of the end of the season. Like there's not really a hope. It's just like that's when the season ends. But now it's like they can do something. They can do something.
Yes. Absolutely. I think that's right. So let's get into Mason here a little bit. We'll end on this part of our video. We're going to have another segment after this, but we're going to end this segment here. We've got a special guest for you all here soon. We're not going to let know who, but we got a special guest for you here soon. We're not letting you know because we're not going to record that section until Tuesday night. Just letting you know. But Mason will play the winner of the 12-13 game. That will be one of LaSalle or St. Bonaventure. Look, we've seen teams before. LaSalle, I mean, you look at Massachusetts a couple of years ago, Matt McCall's group, that was obviously a bit of a better Massachusetts team. That was a 10th place team that made a tiny bit of a run. They won their pillow fight game, and they beat GW on Thursday. I forget. I think it was Dayton who they made sweat then on Friday. I believe it was the 2-seeded Dayton team they made sweat on Friday. But you look at, I think maybe a more apt comparison to the St. Bonaventure team was LaSalle last year. When Fran Dunphy was retiring, LaSalle won their pillow fight game and then made, I believe that was St. Joe's last year.
Yes.
Who they made sweat in the Thursday game. That was very similar, potentially a similar situation here. But let's be very honest. That's a very injured LaSalle team. It's not a good St. Bonaventure team, a team that, in my opinion, has not really matched up well with Mason a lot this year. I mean, obviously, Mason cannot overlook either of those two teams, but this should be a win for Mason. I know people talk about beating teams 3 times type bullshit, but I don't care about that. I don't think that's real. Mason should handle whoever comes out from the pillow fight game for their Thursday afternoon game at 2:00.
Yeah, there's always a pillow. Or last year there wasn't, which is kind of crazy. But generally, there's a pillow fight team that at the under 8 timeout, they know the season's over and the game is just over. Like, and I have a feeling that it could be St. Bonaventure. I don't I don't know who else it could be. I guess actually it could definitely be Loyola Chicago, but there's a team where it's just like we're down 10 of the under 12 timeout, we're gonna lose by 50, and the one thing that's worrying is like that means instead of playing a team where all their players just played 30 plus minutes, we might play a team where their players played 22 minutes. So I hope that Wednesday game, I hope
If they
that
beat each other up, let's
yeah,
see a beat. If they beat each other up, fantastic. We'll go
triple.
from there.
I want triple overtime. I want we want both teams to really have to use all their players. But luckily for Bonaventure, college kids, they don't need rest. So
yeah. I think if we would have, I know it was only a 7-point game, but I kind of thought UMass quit last year in the pillow fight game. Like, I know they only lost by 7, but they just like stopped playing around the 5-minute, like the 4. I mean, it wasn't like a true quitting, but I felt like around the 4-minute mark, they just kind of gave up.
Yeah, that just kind of happens to UMass because they're coached by a lunatic. So
yeah, he's gonna get another year, Palmer. One more year in the MAC for Frank Martin.
he's so excited.
He must be so excited. Highest paid coach in the MAC goes 7-11 in that terrible in that conference, and he's gonna get another year out of it. And it's the highest paid coach in the conference. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that such a healthy way to do things?
Sure is.
But anyway, we're gonna move on here to our next segment. We've got a great interview for you guys coming up, and yeah, we're gonna move into that right now. Ladies and gentlemen, our second segment of our last podcast before the Atlantic 10 tournament starts tomorrow, at the time we're recording, tomorrow in Pittsburgh. I will be there in attendance as a member of the media. Palmer, sadly, will have to be watching from home, but we've got a special guest from you all right now this evening. We've got Tyler from 3BidLeague, the Atlantic 10 podcast, on with us. Tyler, thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. Always a fun time to talk about really any of the teams in the league, but especially one like George Mason that legitimately has a chance to win this thing.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're trying to build here. Obviously, like I said, tournament starts tomorrow, Tyler. We've got the 2 pillow fight games going on. You've got LaSalle versus Bonaventure at the 11:30 tip-off. That winner will go on to play George Mason on Thursday. You've also got Richmond versus Loyola Chicago in the 2:30 game. That winner will go on to play Davidson, the 6th seed, on Thursday. So obviously we've got some fun games hopefully starting tomorrow. But Tyler, I mean, both me and Palmer were a little bit of A10 sickos. We watch everything that we can, but you're one of the main originals, I'd say, with that namesake. So before we kind of get into our things, what are you looking at this tournament? And kind of what's your excitement level going into this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing to just watch out for is what happens with VCU here. Clearly one of the top 2 teams in the league. I think last year I came in feeling like they had a chance to maybe get an at-large, but it felt like a pretty big long shot. This year, it seems like they are in real position, and potentially losing to Duquesne or Rhode Island should be a tough, maybe not with Rhode Island. They feel like their season's kind of on the outs, but having to play Duquesne with the building being stocked with a decent amount of Duquesne fans, given that it's across the street from their campus, a game that could potentially knock them out. But yet, if we see some bid stealers out in the MAC, the Mountain West, VCU might need to win it all and avenge their 2 losses to St. Louis. So that's probably number one. Other than that, I think the fact that if VCU or St. Louis doesn't win it, we kind of have no good grasp on who the third team is, who that kind of logical next contender down would be. And so those are the 2 things I'm really looking out for. Excitement level, I'd say I'll give it somewhere. I'll give it a 9 out of 10. It's always going to be high for A10 tournament week. I think the fact that we do have these established teams at the top, and I do have this small fear that we may see St. Louis and VCU just rampage through everyone and just kind of kill the drama of the week, is really the only thing that drags me down here.
Yeah, that's absolutely a good point. But me and Palmer, we were talking about this earlier on in the segment that we recorded on Sunday evening. Maybe one of the big X Factor teams, and I think to just kind of portray this, me and Palmer are kind of having this discussion. Obviously, St. Louis, a 29-point loss at George Mason, kind of revitalized, I think, some interest in the Patriots after that really rough February Mason had. We talked through that, of course, here on the podcast. But we kind of questioned, does St. Louis have to win that game now? I think before that game against George Mason, you kind of figured St. Louis was in no matter what, maybe playing for seeding a little bit in the A10 tournament. But now you look at, loss, bad loss to Dayton, a hefty loss to Dayton, a loss to Rhode Island that was close, but was, and on the road, but still was a loss. Now a second blowout loss in conference play to George Mason, 29-point loss. Is it, if you're a St. Louis fan, if, put yourself in their shoes, if you're not winning that Friday game, whether that's George Washington or Fordham, are you worrying a little bit at all?
So you corrected yourself in a very, very important way. Not a bad loss to Dayton, hefty loss. The committee doesn't care whether it's a blowout or not. This was a border Q1 game. Is it? Yeah, right now it is literally the single best Q2 game you can possibly have at the moment. But St. Louis has 2 quad 1 wins. They're 5-3 overall against quads 1 and 2. They have 1 loss below that. That's the Rhode Island game. And it's not going to be great for their seeding. I've talked to enough bracketologists over the last couple of days, and if they do take an early loss, especially if it ends up being to Fordham, which I just don't think would happen, GW is not a bad loss. They're still actually the 4th highest ranked team in the conference in the net, despite their struggles the last couple of weeks. Maybe they fall into the first 4. They have to go back to UD Arena, but they're definitely fine. I mean, it seems like there's a pretty strong consensus forming right now that if you look at any bubble cut line, it's really the last 5 spots that are up in the air. And those that like St. Louis, NC State, Missouri group all seem to be pretty comfortable.
And maybe that kind of goes to my next point. You talked about VCU, what's, on one of those teams. You talk about the last 5 spots on the bubble. They're one of those, but I thought I had this as my own personal take, that it feels like this year's bubble teams, these high majors who are on the bubble, we've talked about the last couple of years, how the bubble isn't really that good. But it feels like this year, you had Stanford losing this morning to a really bad Pitt team. That probably takes them off the bubble at this point. But it feels like you've had a couple of those high major teams where they maybe have won that first or second game that would have at least kept them on the bubble or put them in. It feels like a lot of them are losing it this year. That just doesn't seem the case where they're success. So how much does that help VCU going into this game, especially if they can beat, Duquesne or Rhodey on Friday evening? And, if it's, VCU to the semifinals, St. Louis to the semifinals, but, we have that third team maybe coming in and win a title, a George Mason, a Dayton maybe finally gets it done in an A10 tournament. Does St. Joe's kind of shock the world for the shocking season they have? Could this very well be a 3-bid league because of how it seems like the bubble is shaping out, as long as VCU makes it to at least the semifinals?
So I'll profess, I don't have the time to do bracketology. I kind of rely on the professionals to get this done. And then over the past couple of days, I've dove into these essentially because Stanford is out now by every indication after that terrible Pitt loss earlier today. So it's basically 8 teams for 5 spots. Now, bid Steelers in the A10 Mountain West MAC could change that. But what I've started to figure out is this year seems very, very reminiscent of 2022, where you mentioned St. Louis, Davidson that year, who never felt like they had a spectacular resume. They did have a signature win over Alabama that is just simply better than St. Louis's top win over Santa Clara. But they look to be comfortable all year. They get utterly shellacked by Dayton the last day of the regular season. And it's enough that people started getting nervous. They lose the A10 title game. They end up as the best 10th seed. Mm-hmm. Like, they were clearly a good 8 or so spots in. And then Dayton that year, who we all actually thought was completely out of it because they had 4 horrible losses, they end up losing to Richmond in the semis. They're the first team left out when Richmond goes ahead and steals a bid. So what I've been kind of wondering this whole time is If VCU makes it to the semis, makes it to the final, seems like they're in good shape, someone besides St. Louis or VCU wins the title, do the committee look at this and say, yeah, we're good with just having two A10 teams? And for sake of Sunday contingencies, that makes it pretty easy as well, that you can just easily kind of slide VCU out of the bracket. But the hope right now is that we have just seen this horrific carnage on the bubble. Ever since VCU's big win at Dayton on Friday, every single reasonable bubble team lost on Saturday except Stanford. Stanford undid all of those gains today. And now I'm going to ask you guys to not update me on what happened if you have the score in front of you because I'm taping the end of it. But Virginia Tech's losing to Wake Forest. That's a game that might knock them out. SMU probably has to beat Louisville tomorrow. You have Auburn, trying to remember, Auburn, Texas, and Indiana all play terrible teams tomorrow. Yeah. So all of a sudden, if other teams just keep losing, the committee might reach a point on Friday where they look at VCU and just say, okay, this team's clearly in. And if we get a bid thief in the A10, that means all of a sudden like Cal or Virginia Tech or SMU or Indiana gets kicked out instead of VCU. So it's slim, but it seems more doable than it did 4 days ago.
I think that's correct. I think Palmer, I mean, you and me have gone back and forth on this, not just on this show, but in our chats and stuff as well. Palmer, I'm going to put this question to both you and Tyler here a little bit here. I mean, who's a team that you think can really shock? I mean, everyone kind of picks, 5 or 6, the 5 or the 6 seed usually is like, this is a team outside the top 4 that can make a run. Is there anyone, this seems to be a stronger 7, 8, 9 than it's been in recent years. I think metrically you look at it a little bit, maybe not so much Fordham, but I think you look at Duquesne, you especially look at George Washington. It seems to be slightly metrically stronger than the last couple of years. I think George Washington maybe feels like the obvious answer, but Duquesne's home court. Fordham just fought through everything this season. Palmer, we're going to start with you here. Who's your shocking team to maybe make a run at this year's tournament?
I think Duquesne, and that's not including the home court or the semi-home court. They just kind of win close games, and they also have probably the two best or the best 1-2 guards in the conference, I would say. I feel like they can just kind of get hot real fast. Ginyard can just be kind of unguardable for a couple games, and everybody else is good enough that they can just kind of let it go. Maximus Edwards is finally playing basketball again. I just kind of assumed he was just going to enter the portal and not play for the last 2 months of the season.
He would have been out of eligibility. So
he would have. Oh, okay. Well, he would have tried. But yeah, it's a team that just has a high ceiling. Honestly, I thought they were going to be. There was that little period where Mason was kind of losing double bye, but Dayton hadn't really stepped up yet. I thought Duquesne was going to get it, and then Duquesne kind of fell a little bit. I think if we're going like best value, I would say them. I don't really believe in GW. They lost so many close games. I personally believe that winning close games is lucky, but losing close games is not lucky, or it's not unlucky. I think that their game against, I think it was Bonaventure, was insane, where it was like they had the fake lob that just went to the defender and then they didn't get a shot off. It's like that. I mean, I guess it's unlucky, but I don't think they're very well coached. I think that there's a non-zero chance. I say non-zero. It's the 8-9 game. I think Fordham has a decent chance of beating them, and I just think that it's going to be so hard for them to beat GW or beat St. Louis. St. Louis is going to, they're going to have a rest advantage on them, and Schertz is not going to win Coach of the Year, but he's still a great coach. He's definitely going to take something from this Mason game and figure out, how do I not get blown out? You know what I mean? On Tyler.
Yeah.
So GW, I agree. I was on a pod talking about them yesterday, and We see this every couple of years. It's this just super talented team with really high expectations that ends up finishing under 500 in the league. And you stare at them and you say, wow, they could be a big threat. And who knows, maybe they do beat St. Louis. They played extremely well against them, lost at the buzzer in Chaffetz Arena. They came the closest to winning a game in there than any other team that walked into that building this year. But they have just given us 4 months of evidence that they're just not capable of winning 4 games in a row. And I think the biggest thing, they just don't have a point guard. And you could kind of see that as a possible roster flaw early in the year. I think, at least on my end, there was hope that either John Aranguren would look more like the player he was at Hofstra, I want to say. He was at some good CAA school. And then Trey Dinkins, who literally was a average to above average starting point guard in the A10 the year before. Dinkins barely plays now. Aranguren kind of can do it. Christian Jones has always been a not great fit at that spot. And you feel it at the ends of these games. They don't have the guy who you can feel comfortable in a big moment just saying, hey, we trust you to make a play. Now, when you start to look, and Davidson kind of has that problem too. Sam Brown's better than anybody GW has in that moment. But when you start looking at these lesser contenders, and I know we're talking lower seeds, but St. Joe's would fit in where I'm going with this with Derek Simpson. I think Mason, if Corey Mincy was healthy, would probably fit in there. Duquesne very much has that. Terrence Ginyard in the final minute is a guy that you want to have the ball in his hands. There's really no question when they come out of a huddle for a last possession that he's a guy who's going to take the shot. And even beyond that, you have other guys like Jimmy Williams and Alex Williams who have had some huge moments as well. And that's where when we start to try to differentiate the big things, can you knock off a VCU? Can you knock off a St. Louis? If Duquesne can simply hang around with VCU, they have shown this unbelievable ability in the last 6 or so weeks to climb back late in games. The 30-point comeback against Richmond was the most impressive, but they've played a lot of garbage first half to 30-minute performances where they can save themselves late. So all of a sudden, they're down 6 with 5 minutes to go. If you're VCU, you don't feel comfortable in that moment. Now, Duquesne could also get shellacked by Rhode Island, but they've proven that they can go on these long 4 or 5 game winning streaks. They've also taught us that they can go on big 5 game losing streaks, but that doesn't matter this week anymore. So that's to me, that's kind of the obvious if you look outside the top 5, which is who the real contenders truly are.
Yeah, and we're going to bring it back to Mason here a little bit. Look, obviously people are talking about, this past Saturday, again, beating SLU by 29 points, still the 25th ranked in the team in the nation at that time. That's going to get eyeballs. That's going to get attention. But I want to point to the close loss they had against VCU. That kind of felt like the game, at least I think to both me and to Palmer, where that was like, okay, this team might actually be back on track here. You mentioned Corey Mincy. Obviously, he looked like someone who was going to be a locked-on 8-10 first-teamer, maybe the second teamer at bare minimum. Then he hurts his thumb against Duquesne. He plays through it, clearly is struggling, though, through it. I mean, you look at his stats through those couple of games there right after the Duquesne game. He didn't hit double-digit points again until that VCU game only a couple of days ago now. So, but you look at those 2 games there. You look against VCU, look against St. Louis. He starts to look comfortable again. If they are, I think Dr. John Gianni, I went to the game on Saturday, but I rewatched it on the recording, and Dr. John said, if Mincy is healthy, how close does that put Mason back to that team that was 21, 22-2, 22-3? And how much of a difference can that make at this tournament?
Well, to answer your first question, I do have to counter with another question, which is there's no way Fat Hill's playing this week, right?
Oh, we have no idea. We've been told nothing. It's like
it
50-50.
looked nasty in the arena, but I didn't have a great angle, and I happened to be at EBA that day.
Yeah, I'll give it to Palmer.
That was his shoe. The thing that turned sideways was his shoe, not his foot. Because
Yeah, I mean,
I thought
they
that
did say
too.
it was a sprain, so
And he came back with no boot, just ice.
okay.
We have not been told it's season ending, but we have not told it isn't.
I mean, my simple answer: if Fat Hill doesn't play, they're not winning 4 straight games.
Yeah,
like
I
just
think
plain
fair.
and simple, because he's way too important for their offensive creation. And I mean, God, I wish they just had Braden O'Connor, because he kind of solves their biggest problem on offense and defense. But Masai Troutman has given me some hope with the game that he had in that second half after Hill went out against St. Bonaventure. Mincy, I mean, I had kind of written him off for the rest of the season before this final week. So I don't think you're ever going to really recapture that top form of where this team was when they just put the hammer down on VCU in those last 10 minutes in Fairfax back in early January. I'm also not sure they need to go to that level to win this tournament, though.
I think that's a very good point. I think that's an interesting point. Maybe that's why we invited you on, because I don't know if that's necessarily the way we would have looked at it here, but I think that's a good point here. Certainly, like you said, the 5-6 seed. I've always kind of said if you're not going to make the top 4, 5-6 seed is where you're going to want to be, because at least on Thursday you're playing against a team that played the day before and did not rest. That helps a little bit. Maybe you can get a blowout going there. Maybe you can rest some guys for Friday. But like you said, it's 4-4. Such a hard thing to do. I mean, Mason couldn't do 3-3 last year, couldn't get over that VCU hump, sadly. But it really would be a great storyline, though, for it to be Mason VCU yet again. Like, I kind of think that would be a cool storyline, for it to be Mason VCU yet again. And like you kind of said earlier, depending on how other results go on the bubble and in other tournaments, does New Mexico come through in the Mountain West? Does Akron knock off Miami of Ohio in the title game to maybe get a 2-bid MAC going? And again, where it could be winner goes to the NCAA tournament and the loser goes home between one of the biggest rivalries in the Atlantic 10. I think that'd be a heck of a storyline. Maybe that's my Mason bias showing through a little bit too much. But I think that'd be a heck of a storyline for the last day in Pittsburgh. But finally, I think I'm going to end this on a non-tournament question here for us, Tyler. I think I'm going to kind of go around to both you and Palmer here. Mark Schmidt already announced his retirement. Question mark, I think, is the right thing to put there, but has announced his retirement. He's not coming back next year. St. Bonaventure is looking for a new coach. Do we think after this week anyone else is looking for a new coach? Because, you look at the jobs that are open, there's been a lot of talk that, Josh Schertz does not necessarily want to leave St. Louis unless it's going to be a place where he can win a national title. I think a lot of people are unsure if that job is currently going to come available this summer. Tony Skinn, you wonder if how much that flatlining in February, and again, March kind of fixes all wounds. If Mason goes on a run, what does that do to his stock again? But does it look like maybe there'll be a lot of leavers, mover-uppers this year in the coaching ranks from the A10? So I think my question to you is, really, it comes down to, do we see change in Kingston under the new athletic director? And does it maybe anyone else surprise us with a firing?
I don't think so. We were at a point in January. I don't think there's a surprise. We can get to Archie in a second, but in January, I was looking around, like half this league, it felt like could have potentially been on their way out. But Richmond just gave a vote of confidence, one more year of Chris Mooney. The way Dayton closed the season, Anthony Grant is not going to get fired. And he has now publicly come out and said he is not planning on retiring. I think Davidson got rid of any possible questions there. St. Joe's, Steve Donahue went and won the job. That was one that I think we all assumed was going to be open with him kind of in that pseudo interim role. That's basically just leaves Rhode Island at that point. Everybody else, either their team's pretty good or it's a brand new coach. I would not be surprised at all. I think they've been essentially battling Bonaventure and Loyola for the worst team in the A10 over the last month or so here, which is insane because they beat St. Louis and Duquesne over that stretch. But their losses are horrific. I honestly can't believe they somehow steadied the ship to be able to finish in 10th here. They beat St. Louis because Jonah Hinton just got scalding hot, and SLU happened to play their worst game of the season on that same night. The Duquesne game, Rhode Island played decently well on a night where Duquesne played utterly awful. So they've kind of just stumbled in. It really probably just comes down to, is the new athletic director comfortable with paying whatever his buyout is? Because they gave him such a big contract. Do you want to eat one more big year there, or just kind of wait it out? And they're going to lose their whole team this year anyway to graduation. So,
Palmer, what about you? Do you think we see a surprise, or is it just going to be, what the hell happens with Archie, and then we move on from there?
I think the only other possible surprise could be Drew Valentine. I don't think it happens just because he's had 2 good years and 2 bad years, and those guys usually stay around. I honestly thought coming into the season that McKillop was going to get I think McKillop was a year away from being a year away, and being a 6th seed with a pretty young team, that's kind of quelled anything there. I think Archie, man, I really liked Archie this year. I really liked the Rhode Island team. They finally did something, because every year it was just okay offense, horrible defense, and it was finally good defense, and it just didn't work. It's just a problem. I think, either the AD, I think this is either Archie's last year or next year is, because that AD either doesn't want to pay his buyout now, but that AD wants their guy. That they want their guy. They're not going to be okay with Archie. No AD should be okay with a coach that, I mean, I'm not looking at stats here. Is 10th his best finish?
yes.
It feels like
it's his first time out of the pillow fight.
And he would be in the pillow fight if there was a 15th team. I mean, you can't. I say you can't keep him. You can keep him if you really don't want to pay that, but he's on his way out. Sorry, Archie. I like the gum thing. I hope it works out at Wright State, wherever you go after this.
He'll go be an assistant under his brother again.
I would say Sean will give him a job.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Sean will give him a job at Texas.
Loyola, because I forgot about them. It really seems like they have been super aggressive in the last month or so. It's just leaking to anyone that will listen that they're not going to fire him.
Okay.
They've never said anything publicly, but any person who claims to know somebody there is confident that he's coming back.
It does feel kind of like, I think, just about this kind of my last point here. Drew, it's been such a weird thing with Drew Valentine. Since Loyola is doing the A10, I mean, very high expectations coming in to their first season in the Atlantic 10. They were a tournament team the year before. As a member still of the MVC, I mean, there was a lot of chatter about what that team could bring to the Atlantic 10, and then just horrible. I mean, 10-21, a 14-4 conference finish. And then he's followed that up with 20. Then he followed that up with 23 wins in 2024, 25 wins in 2025, and then it's just it's basically, I think it's almost impossible to even get to double-digit wins this season. That's how bad they've been. You look at the stats. He's underperformed his preseason rankings on KenPom every year since joining the Atlantic 10. Even in those good 2 years he had. Previous to this one, I don't know. I think it's a young coach. He's figuring stuff out. I believe that. But, man, I'm surprised they're that strongly behind him. I know he's coming back. Same thing I've heard from Tyler. Anyone who claims to know someone there tells you he's coming back next year. It just doesn't seem like a good idea. That's a program that I think has a much higher ceiling in this league than I think probably at least 60% of the other teams do. I think in terms of where that team's ceiling can be, but that's just kind of how it is. I think in this world nowadays, they're going to keep their guy, and I understand why, but I just don't know long term if it's the right move or short term if it's the right move. there in Chicago. But otherwise, though, Tyler, are you going to be making the trip to Pittsburgh at all? I think that's our last question here. Will you be going to Pittsburgh, or are you going to be watching from your home?
I'm here. This is this is my hometown. So yeah, PNC Park sits behind me. Yeah, I can't. The camera being mirrored kind of screws up my sense of direction, but you get where I'm pointing at here.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a short drive in, so I'm even going to the pillow fight this year.
All right, then I will see you at the pillow fight tomorrow then, sir. I'm leaving my house here in Harrisburg at 6:30 in the morning to be there in time. So I can't wait for that. Palmer, like I said, is going to be watching from the couch, but you'll hear from him as well. You're going to want to follow us at Giant Killer. Tyler, you're going to want to follow at 3BidLeague on X. I believe that's still the name of the account.
3BidLeague Pod for 3BidLeague Pod for the account. Yep.
For the account 3.
It's the number, not the word.
Yes, the number 3.
Number 3, not the word. 3, the number. BidLeague Pod, the place for Atlantic 10 basketball. Tyler, we really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to come talk with us tonight. I will see you at the tournament. And thank you all for listening. This has been the Onward to Victory podcast by Giant Killer. He's Palmer. I'm Joe. He is Tyler. He's from 3BidLeague. Again, Tyler, thank you for coming on. We will see you guys soon. We're going to try and do some episodes before the tournament. Me and Palmer got to work out some schedule things, but we'll do some episodes during the tournament as well. We'll see you guys soon. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.